The multinational's printer jammed again. That Wednesday morning in Denver, the clock seemed to conspire against Emily Sanders. The urgent report for the board was stuck in that stubborn machine, and with every passing second, the pressure in her chest grew heavier. People hurried past in the corridor, their empty gazes, not even noticing her. It was as if Emily were invisible in that glass and steel building, just another forgotten detail in the company's impersonal and relentless environment. She took a deep breath, trying to contain the silent desperation threatening to spill over. Behind the reception desk, where she spent most of her day, her hands trembled slightly as she avoided looking at the clock. The anxiety of being late, the fear of failing to deliver the report in time, and the certainty that no one really cared about her daily struggle weighed heavily on her shoulders. Suddenly, without warning, a man appeared beside the printer. Silent, with calm steps, he examined the machine with a serene gaze and skilled fingers. Emily barely noticed his presence, immersed in the chaos around her. He didn't say a word, just worked to fix the equipment as people kept passing by like indifferent ghosts. When the printer finally came back to life, Emily looked up and thanked him, surprised by the unexpected kindness. The man gave a faint smile, his deep eyes expressing a calm that felt out of place in such a rushed environment. He introduced himself as Nick, a technician or janitor, he said, but there was something more about him, something she couldn't quite define. Emily returned to her desk, the printed report finally in hand, but the impression of that moment lingered. It wasn't just the relief of being able to carry on with her work, it was the feeling that, for a brief moment, someone had truly seen her, someone who seemed to understand, without needing words, the silent battle she fought each day in that corporate maze. In a building full of cold voices and fleeting glances, that simple man had brought a breath of humanity, and without Emily knowing it, her life was about to change forever, beginning in that seemingly insignificant moment, rich with meaning. The morning that began with a jammed printer, an unforgiving clock, and suffocating isolation had made room for an unexpected connection, a spark of hope in the middle of a stifling routine. Trapped between bills, responsibilities, and the weight of loneliness, Emily had no idea that this brief encounter would be the first step in transforming her life. And so, as the day went on, the mystery behind that man remained hidden, a secret that would soon unveil a new world, where empathy, courage, and transformation would walk hand in hand. Emily had no idea that Nick was more than a technician, more than a kind stranger. He was the catalyst for a profound change, the key to a silent revolution about to begin in the heart of that multinational. The report had been delivered, the printer was working, but at that very moment, something greater was beginning to take shape between the lines of Emily's life as she struggled to stay on her feet, invisible to so many, yet finally seen by that stranger. And this was only the introduction to a story filled with chapters of resilience, discovery, and rebirth. Emily Sanders lived in a small apartment in Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood with her 4-year-old daughter, Mia. Life hadn't been kind to her in recent years. 2 years ago, she had left a marriage marked by emotional abuse wounds that still lingered in both her soul and her daily routine. Since then, her priority had been to raise Mia with all the love and protection she herself never had. The modest apartment was simple but full of warmth. Mia's drawings on the fridge, toys scattered across the living room, and the smell of freshly baked cookies Emily made on weekends to bring a sense of normalcy to their lives. Every day, before the sun rose, Emily was already awake. She made breakfast, helped Mia get ready for daycare, and raced against the clock to get to work. The commute to the pharmaceutical multinational was always a challenge, crowded buses and unpredictable traffic. At the office, her life split into 2 separate realities: the devoted mother and the invisible receptionist. Emily was efficient and polite, carrying out her duties with quiet discipline, but she was hardly ever noticed beyond the front desk where she worked. In the corporate environment, Emily's light seemed dimmed by routine and the indifference of her coworkers. She was a constant figure at reception, the friendly face greeting visitors, but no one really knew her name or her story. The company's rigid culture, focused on results and figures, left no room for vulnerability or genuine human connection. Emily felt like a small, disposable cog in a massive machine, a spectator in the cold hallways where important decisions were made without regard for those below. Her recent past carried the silent scars of an abusive marriage. Daniel, her ex-husband, was a controlling man who chipped away at her self-worth through words and actions. The separation hadn't been easy or quick. There were legal battles, sleepless nights, and a constant fear that he might try to reclaim control not only over her, but over Mia as well. Still, Emily endured. Each day was a small victory against the fear and insecurity that tried to creep into her life. Despite everything, she found strength in the simple things she loved. Mia's smile in the morning, the bedtime stories she told her daughter, and the quiet dream of a better future, a dream that felt distant in that glass building, where she was always just another face never heard, never truly seen. At work, her efforts were invisible. She made coffee, managed schedules, greeted suppliers, and kept the place impeccably organized with quiet professionalism. But no one saw what was behind the surface. A mother stretching every dollar to make it to the end of the month. A woman who, despite her exhaustion, refused to give up. Loneliness was a constant ghost, especially during quick lunches alone in the small staff kitchen, surrounded by chatter and laughter that never included her. The routine repeated day after day, creating a bubble of isolation that felt impenetrable. Emily knew she had to be strong not just for Mia, but for herself. It was a daily battle not to be consumed by discouragement, invisibility, and the sense of always being one step away from breaking down. Yet there was something about the way Emily faced it all that went beyond mere survival. There was a quiet bravery, a resilience that didn't show in her tired eyes, but pulsed deep within her. That inner strength was what kept her going, even when it felt like no one else believed in her. And so, between bills, Mia's care, and a heavy loneliness, Emily carried on. An ordinary woman fighting an invisible battle in the heart of a bustling city. A woman who longed, deep down, to be seen, to be heard, and maybe, just maybe one day, to be truly recognized for who she really was. The morning after the printer jammed, Emily still felt the strange sensation left by that man who had appeared so silently to fix the machine. He had introduced himself simply as Nick, without much explanation or grand gestures. To Emily, he seemed like just another technician hired to fix small problems in the building, someone who would cross her path and then disappear into the company's routine. But there was something different about Nick's inattentiveness she rarely encountered in that cold, competitive environment. In the days that followed, Emily noticed that Nick would show up at unexpected moments, always quiet, always present. It wasn't common for someone to truly listen to her, even when she was only venting about the daily rush. But Nick listened, and not in a distracted way. It was as if he absorbed every word with genuine respect, no judgment, no hurry. A rare gesture in that mirrored building, where haste and indifference ruled relationships. In one brief conversation, as she explained a problem with the copier, Nick not only listened, he asked subtle questions that showed a real interest. He made a comment about how technology sometimes made things harder, not easier, and his empathy caught Emily by surprise. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. He wasn't just the guy fixing machines, he was someone who saw her as a person, with stories, struggles, and dreams hidden beneath the routine. Still, Emily kept her distance. The corporate world had taught her that close relationships could be traps, especially for someone like her, who already carried the scars of a painful past. She wasn't sure what to expect from this calm man, but she sensed there was something more beneath his simple technician title. Curiosity began to grow quietly. Who was Nick, really? Why did he seem so different from the others? His calm demeanor and attentive gaze didn't match the typical employee profile she was used to. It was as if he was there for something more, not just to fix technical issues. But the mystery remained, wrapped in a discreet and almost invisible aura. The company's atmosphere stayed the same, cold, rigid, filled with silent power games and superficial smiles. But Nick's presence seemed to stir something inside the gears, something subtle, yet undeniable. It was as if a different current was starting to form, a lighter energy pushing back against the exhausting routine. And Emily, without knowing it, was at the center of that shift. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Nick's relationship remained quiet but meaningful. He always appeared at just the right time, not to dominate or lead, but simply to listen, to be there. And even in silence, his presence brought a sense of safety Emily hadn't felt in a long time. Nick wasn't in a hurry to reveal who he really was. He preferred to keep the mystery, observing, learning, sensing the true pulse of a company that, to him, was more than numbers and goals. He was searching for what no one else noticed, the essence of the people behind the positions and titles. And Emily, with her quiet courage and authenticity, was the first to awaken his genuine attention. As the building's mirrored windows reflected the gray Denver sky, something began to change inside. Subtle, but powerful. And Emily, without realizing it, was no longer alone in that world that had once felt so vast and impersonal. There was a kind stranger, a man with a different gaze, who didn't see her as disposable, but as someone with worth, someone capable of rewriting her own story. Nick's mystery remained, but his impact had already begun to take root. For the first time, Emily felt there might be hope beyond the suffocating routine, that maybe her life really could change. And that quiet man, known only by a simple name, was the silent key to a door beginning to open before her. Days after that casual encounter at the printer, Emily received an unexpected message, an invitation to go up to the top floor of the company, a place that had always felt unreachable to her, almost like a territory reserved for executives and decisions that never trickled down to reception. The invitation felt strange, and yet it stirred a curiosity laced with apprehension and hope. Who had summoned her to that elegant room with the view of downtown Denver, and why? As Emily walked through the wide, silent hallways on the top floor of the building, she felt the weight of a different atmosphere. It was a sophisticated space, filled with afternoon light pouring through the glass walls, furnished with sleek modern pieces and a commanding desk at the center. Seated in a comfortable chair was Nick, but he was no longer the quiet, unassuming man who had fixed the printer. Now, in front of her, Nick revealed himself as Nicholas Hartman, the new CEO of the company, a name that carried respect and authority throughout the halls of that global pharmaceutical giant. Emily paused for a moment, stunned. The image she had of this calm, attentive man suddenly took on a new dimension. Nicholas wasn't just a kind stranger, he was the highest leader in the organization, someone with the power to truly change everything around him. She realized, in that instant, that he had been walking the halls in disguise, feeling the company's pulse up close, witnessing the unseen reality. With a calm smile, Nicholas invited her to sit. His voice was firm, yet warm. He spoke about the vision he had for the company, a vision far beyond numbers, goals, and cold metrics. Nicholas wanted to create a culture where people were valued, where active listening and empathy became fundamental pillars. He spoke of Project Aurora, an innovative initiative aimed at transforming the corporate culture, breaking the grip of individualism and the indifference that had long defined daily life at the company. When Nicholas mentioned Emily's name, his tone carried a distinct note of recognition. He had noticed her quiet courage, the way she stood tall despite the invisible battles she fought each day. To him, Emily represented the kind of person who could be the seed of that transformation, someone who, though not traditionally seen as a leader, carried a strength and authenticity capable of inspiring real change. The invitation to join Project Aurora wasn't just symbolic. Nicholas made it clear he wanted Emily to actively participate in the meetings and discussions that would shape the company's future. He saw in her a necessary voice, a perspective to often overlooked in strategic decisions. The proposal was both a challenge and a rare acknowledgement. It was an invitation for Emily to step out of invisibility and become the protagonist of her own story within that organization. She felt the weight and responsibility of the moment, and at the same time, a spark of hope lit inside her. It was the first time someone had seen her, not just as the receptionist, the exhausted mother, or the woman struggling to survive, but as someone with value, someone who could contribute to real, meaningful change. It was a call to grow, to rise, to break the barriers imposed by corporate culture and by her own past. Nicholas spoke sincerely about the challenges ahead. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, gossip, judgment from colleagues who wouldn't understand the sudden shift. But he assured her he would stand beside her not as a distant boss, but as a partner in building a new era for everyone. When the meeting ended, Emily left that top floor with a whirlwind of emotions: nervousness, excitement, and a new sense of purpose. The world that had once seemed so cold and out of reach was beginning to change shape, and she felt she was standing at the threshold of a profound transformation, both personal and professional. She knew that from that day forward, her life would never be the same. Nicholas Hartman's invitation to join Project Aurora was more than just a career step. It was a path to redemption, to reconnecting with herself, to finally claiming a voice that had long been silenced. And Emily was ready to accept the challenge to grow, to bloom, and to show that true leadership can come from where no one expects it, from the quiet courage of a woman who never stopped fighting. By accepting the invitation to join Project Aurora, Emily entered a new and challenging world, where her voice, once silent and ignored, began to find space to echo. The first meetings were tense, filled with skeptical looks and whispers that drifted through the hallways. But Emily, with her quiet courage, stood firm, listening intently, learning to express her ideas with clarity and determination. At first, her contributions were simple, almost modest. Suggestions to improve communication between departments, ideas to make the work environment more welcoming, small actions that seemed insignificant to some, but carried deep impact for those living the company's daily routine. Slowly, her ideas began to gain traction, and with them, a new sense of respect began to grow around Emily. What had once been invisibility became recognition. Colorful post-it notes started appearing on her desk with words of encouragement, courage, inspiration, strength. Small signs that something was changing, not just within her, but in the entire dynamic of that corporate space. Co-workers who had once ignored her now listened to her ideas, and even some of the company's leaders began to take notice. Emily felt herself beginning to bloom. The transformation wasn't just external. Inside, a new woman was emerging, more confident, more aware of her worth. Project Aurora wasn't just a company initiative, it was a movement rekindling her self-esteem, breaking the invisible chains of doubt and fear left by her past. In every meeting, she brought her keen eye for the struggles faced by those who, like her, had always been pushed to the margins. She spoke about the importance of listening not only to the loudest voices, but to the quiet ones too. Her authenticity, her sincerity, touched people and began to change how others saw her. But that quiet growth didn't go unnoticed. The whispers began. Gossip, subtle accusations of favoritism. Some colleagues saw her as a threat, not because of her competence, but because of what she represented. A disruption of the established order, a voice that no longer fit the traditional mold. Resistance emerged like an invisible wall, another challenge Emily had to learn to face with resolve. That's when Nicholas Hartman, no longer in disguise, stepped in. In an important meeting, in front of everyone, he publicly praised Emily's courage, recognizing her essential role in Project Aurora and in reshaping the company's culture. His words weren't just an act of leadership, they were a shield that protected Emily from criticism and solidified her place in the new narrative. From that point on, everything truly began to shift. Respect started to take root. The walls of prejudice and indifference began to fall. Emily was no longer the invisible receptionist, she had become a symbol of resilience and hope. The company, once a cold and impersonal space, began to pulse with empathy and recognition. Even in the face of challenges, Emily moved forward, driven by a greater purpose. With each small victory, each word of encouragement, she felt she was building something far beyond her personal growth. She was helping create a culture where everyone could be seen, heard, and valued. And in the midst of it all, Emily discovered a strength she never knew she had. Not just the strength to face work-related hurdles, but the strength to heal old wounds, to reconnect with herself, and to make room for a new kind of leadership, one born from silent courage. Emily's rise as a leader was a promise of change, not just for herself, but for the entire company. A reminder that even in the smallest actions, in the quietest voices, there can be power enough to transform entire realities. And so, through meetings, colorful post-its, renewed glances, and challenges faced, Emily kept going, each day more confident, each day more grounded, proving that true leadership doesn't come from a title, but from the ability to be authentic, brave, and above all, deeply human. But as Emily's role in Project Aurora continued to grow, the changes she helped inspire began to unsettle those who had long benefited from the old order. That simple woman, once invisible, was now drawing eyes filled with envy and mistrust. Whispers echoed through the halls of the multinational. Malicious gossip spread behind her back. Some colleagues, uncomfortable with her rise, began crafting stories that questioned whether she truly belonged. In the company cafe, in the corridors, even in meeting rooms, resistance took root, quietly but relentlessly. Comments insinuated that Emily was receiving special treatment, that the project was just a scheme to favor a chosen few. The atmosphere grew tense. With each passing day, Emily felt the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders, a weight that threatened to destabilize her. She knew these criticisms weren't just about her. They were about the fear of change, of the transformation she represented. But the battle to remain strong in that environment was exhausting. Many times, the urge to give up crept in, fed by doubt and the feeling of standing alone against a rigid, unyielding system. That's when Nicholas Hartman took a decisive stand. He understood that the success of Project Aurora depended not only on ideas, but on public support for the people driving it, especially Emily, who had become the face of that transformation. In a general meeting, in front of all leaders and employees, Nicholas silenced the murmurs with a clear and firm statement. He praised Emily's courage, highlighting her dedication, her authenticity, and the strength she showed in facing daily challenges. Nicholas made it clear that Project Aurora wasn't about favoritism, but about recognizing the value of every individual, especially those who had long been overlooked. His words weren't just a defense. They were a declaration of change, a warning that the time of indifference and prejudice was coming to an end. The impact of Nicholas's speech was immediate. Silence filled the room, and many realized that a new era was beginning at the company, one where courage and authenticity would matter more than positions or titles. Emily, empowered by the CEO's support, took a deep breath and regained the confidence that had begun to waver. Still, the journey wasn't free of obstacles. Envy and resistance remained, but now they faced a solid wall. Nicholas made a point of publicly reinforcing Emily's role, along with others who committed to the transformation. He encouraged meetings, discussions, and initiatives that made Project Aurora visible and respected, gradually silencing baseless gossip and criticism. For Emily, that moment marked a turning point. She realized her fight wasn't just personal, it was part of a greater battle for respect, equality, and dignity in the workplace. Every hurtful comment, every suspicious glance, was proof that she was on the right path, challenging a system that desperately needed change. Despite the difficulties, Emily stood her ground, supported by the growing network around her. Colleagues who had once been indifferent now found inspiration in her bravery. The quiet transformation she embodied began to spread to those willing to believe in a different future. In that setting of resistance and perseverance, Emily discovered that true strength didn't come from unanimous approval, but from the determination to carry on, even when adversity felt overwhelming. She learned that leadership demands the courage to face judgment, to endure moments of loneliness, and to persist in the pursuit of what is right. And so, amid sideways glances and discreet applause, Emily remained steady. Her once muted voice now echoed with enough force to inspire real change. Project Aurora was taking shape, gaining soul and substance, and the company once cold and unyielding was slowly transforming into a place where empathy and respect were becoming foundational values. The fight against envy and judgment was tough, but Emily was ready. With Nicholas by her side, she knew she wasn't walking alone. Together, they were building not just a new corporate culture, but a new future, one where every person could be seen, heard, and valued for who they truly were. Just when Emily felt she was finally finding her place in Project Aurora, a shadow from the past returned to haunt her. Daniel, her ex-husband, reappeared without warning, bringing with him a threat that chilled the air around her. He wasn't there to apologize or seek reconciliation, he came to reclaim the control he had always craved. this time using the courts as a weapon. The letters, the messages, the threatening calls came like clockwork, bringing back the fear Emily thought she had left behind. Daniel was demanding custody of Mia, trying to undo everything she had rebuilt since the separation. The threat of losing her daughter to that controlling man felt like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. The anxiety that had followed her for years became nearly unbearable, a tight knot in her chest that made it hard to breathe. The loneliness she once knew so well now felt like a prison. But Emily wasn't alone anymore. Project Aurora hadn't only transformed the company, it had also strengthened her as a person. When Nicholas learned of the situation, he didn't hesitate to stand by her. He understood this battle went far beyond the corporate world. It was a fight for freedom, dignity, and the safety of a mother and her child. Together, they decided it was time to confront Daniel with everything they had. An experienced attorney, Teresa, was introduced to Emily. She wasn't just skilled, she was determined, with a steady gaze and an unshakable commitment to protecting victims of abuse. The connection between them was instant, a bond of trust that gave Emily both the legal and emotional support she desperately needed. Preparing for the courtroom showdown wasn't easy. Every painful detail of Emily's past had to be revisited to build a solid case. She recalled years of silent fear, emotional abuse, and manipulation that nearly broke her. But this time, she was armed with truth, courage, and a support system that stood behind her. On the day of the trial, Emily walked into the courtroom with her heart racing, but with the resolve of someone who knew this was her final battle to be free. The room was packed, and Daniel tried to intimidate her with his stare, but she stood firm. With a clear, unwavering voice, she told her story. She spoke of the abuse, the fear, the sleepless nights, the daily effort to protect Mia. She didn't beg for compassion, she demanded justice. Teresa backed her up with documents, testimonies, and evidence proving Daniel's inability to provide a safe environment for their daughter. Her arguments were precise, heartfelt, and powerful. Gradually, the court came to understand that custody had to remain with Emily, the true protector of Mia. When the judge finally announced the verdict, a collective breath filled the courtroom. Daniel lost custody and all visitation rights. For Emily, those words felt like rebirth. For the first time in years, she felt the peace she had longed for, a deep relief spreading through her entire being, dissolving years of anguish and fear. Leaving the courthouse, Emily looked up at Denver's blue sky with tears in her eyes. Not tears of sorrow, but of triumph. The battle had been grueling, the road long, but she had won. Nicholas stood beside her, strong and supportive, a symbol not just of solidarity, but of the complete transformation now present in her life. Mia, at 4 years old, didn't grasp the legal details, but she felt her mother's safety. And Emily knew that, from that moment on, they could finally breathe without fear and build a new story together, a story of freedom, respect, and unconditional love. The ghost of the past had been faced and defeated, making room for a future where Emily could finally be the woman and mother she had always dreamed of becoming. And in that moment, holding Mia's hand, she knew nothing, not even life's harshest storms, could ever bring her down again. Emily walked out of the courthouse with trembling hands, but a steady heart. For the first time, she felt like she could fully breathe without fear of someone knocking at her door, without the constant weight of being watched. Mia ran ahead, laughing, clutching her sketchbook in her tiny hands, joyful and carefree, as if she could feel her mother's happiness. The days that followed felt almost surreal. For the first time in years, Emily woke without a jolt of panic. She slept with the window open. She walked the streets hand in hand with her daughter, without needing to look over her shoulder. Daniel's absence wasn't just physical, it was as if his shadow had finally lifted. The silence was no longer threatening, it was peace. Emily decided to move apartments. She didn't want anything that reminded her of her old life. With Nicholas's help, she found a small but bright place, with large windows and a balcony where Mia could plant her first flowers. Every unpacked box was a symbol of rebirth. Every piece of furniture, a new chapter. The house now smelled of cake in the oven and echoed with soft laughter, not shouting. She decorated everything with Mia, letting her choose the color of her bedroom walls: lilac, of course, and hanging the girls' paintings as if they were masterpieces. They bought a new bookshelf for books and games. Emily allowed herself a new coffee maker, a navy blue armchair to read in at night, and even a few plants she lovingly tried to care for. The routine had changed too. Mia went to school with her uniform neat and her hair tied with a ribbon. Emily walked her to the door every day. In the afternoon, they would stop by the market together, choose fruit, and talk about what they'd do on the weekend. It was a simple life, but a happy one. Emily also reconnected with herself. She went back to studying, reviving her old dream of becoming a nurse. She dove into her books, attended online classes at night, and little by little, she felt her identity being rebuilt. She was no longer just the woman who had survived, she was a woman who was blooming. Nicholas stayed close, but never intrusive. He was a gentle presence, a quiet help, a constant smile. Their friendship grew naturally. He understood her silences, respected her space, and whenever he could, he brought flowers for Mia, for the little artist of the house, as he'd say. There was no rush, just the slow and beautiful building of something new, something real. And even on the days when fear still whispered from afar, because scars don't fade overnight, Emily knew that now she had choices. She had strength. She had a voice. And above all, she had freedom. On the balcony of their new home, on a quiet night, Emily and Mia lay in a makeshift hammock, staring at the sky. Mia pointed to a shooting star and said, "We can make a wish, right?" Emily smiled and replied, "I think it's already come true." From that moment on, there was no past left to haunt them, only a possible present and an open future filled with hope, lightness, and love. Emily's new life, free from her ex-husband's shadow, was more than a change of address. It was the return of who she truly was, a strong woman, a whole mother, a soul that had begun to shine again. And now, that light illuminated her daughter's path too. The big day of the company's annual event finally arrived, and Emily felt a mix of emotions racing through her chest. It was time to be publicly recognized, to step onto the stage and show everyone who she really was, not just the receptionist who had gone unseen for years, but the woman who, with courage and determination, had transformed her life and, in a way, the entire culture of that multinational. The venue was lit up, and the audience was full of faces that, just months earlier, may not have even noticed her. When her name was announced, a respectful silence took over the auditorium. Emily walked to the stage with steady steps, her eyes meeting the gaze of people watching her closely. Nicholas Hartman stood beside her, smiling with pride and admiration in his eyes. He held her hand firmly, a simple gesture, but one that carried the weight of their journey together. On stage, Emily felt a wave of emotion, but didn't let it shake her. Her speech was a mix of humility and strength. She spoke of her journey, of the hardships she had faced, and the importance of believing in yourself even when no one else does. She spoke of fighting against invisibility, of the pain of carrying old fears, but also of the hope that was born when someone truly saw her. Each word rang with sincerity, touching the hearts of everyone present. Emily didn't just speak for herself, she spoke for everyone who had ever been ignored, underestimated, or silenced. She became a living symbol of renewal and empathy, proof that real change begins when we give a voice to those who were never heard. The audience responded with heartfelt applause, many of them filled with genuine emotion. Mia, her little daughter, was in the crowd, her eyes shining with pride. When the speech ended, the girl ran up to the stage and into her mother's arms. Emily held her tightly, feeling in that embrace the true meaning of her victory. In that moment, she wasn't just a woman who had fought alone, she was a fulfilled mother, an inspiring leader, a whole person who could finally smile without fear. The event became a celebration of transformation. Nicholas, now without reserve, publicly acknowledged the impact of Project Aurora, emphasizing how Emily's courage had opened the door to a new era at the company, one where empathy, respect, and human value would be the foundation of collective success. He reaffirmed the commitment to keep fighting for a workplace where every voice could be heard. Standing on that lit-up stage, Emily knew that every challenge had been worth it. The nights of insecurity, the legal battles, the internal resistance, they were all part of the path that had brought her there, to that celebration of life and resilience. She smiled not for Nicholas, not for the recognition, but because she could finally see herself with pride, because she could finally recognize her own strength. In that moment, the auditorium wasn't just a corporate space, it was sacred ground, where the story of an ordinary woman became an example for many. It was living proof that even within rigid, indifferent structures, empathy and courage can transform lives, break down barriers, and build more humane futures. As she held Mia in her arms, Emily knew this was only one step. There was still more to do, many roads to walk. But the certainty that she was no longer alone gave her the strength to keep going. The future was now an open horizon, full of possibilities and promise. And so, in that moment of pure emotion, Emily smiled at the audience, at Nicholas, at Mia, and most of all, at herself. Because she had won, not for anyone else, but for herself. For the woman who never gave up, for the mother who never stopped loving, for the leader who found her voice in the quiet courage of everyday life. It was the end of a journey and the beginning of a legacy. Hey everyone, we've reached the end of this amazing story that reminds us that even when everything seems tough, silent courage can change lives, and that each one of us has a voice that deserves to be heard. If you enjoyed Emily's journey, you know what to do. Hit that like button, because that helps spread these stories that touch the heart. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the Enchanting Stories channel. This is the place for anyone who loves to feel inspired, moved, and to dive into stories that make us think and smile. Come be part of this beautiful community that keeps growing every day, full of people who know the value of a great story, and of course, that special touch of magic that only we have. Now, tell me, which city are you watching from? I want to know where this conversation is reaching, because here, from my little corner, I'm already excited to bring more stories that will touch your heart. So drop a comment, say hi to Enchanting Stories, and let's keep this adventure going together. See you in the next video, with more emotion, more triumph, and of course, lots of enchantment. Thanks so much, and until next time.